Hayek called socialism one of the most ambitious creations of the human spirit, but then argued it needed refuting to save us from, his words, barbarism. Strong stuff. So let's get started.
Okay, so to get Hayek's view, we need to think about this fundamental conflict, instinct versus the rules of this extended order.
Right. He talks about our instincts developing way back, small nomadic groups where solidarity, altruism towards people you knew, that was key for survival.
Absolutely, and that mindset was so strong that even someone like Aristotle, pretty late in the game, relatively speaking, he still thought order could only really exist in a small city, as far as a herald's voice could reach.
He actually thought a state of 100,000 was impossible, even though bigger ones existed.
He did. It shows how ingrained that small group thinking was. He couldn't quite see beyond it, even observing the world around him. He was sort of trapped by that instinctual model.
So, okay, if early humans weren't solitary noble savages, what were they? Hayek says they were collectivist, right? Bound by the group.
Yes, intensely collectivist. Real individual freedom, the kind we think of, only started to emerge, he argues, with the evolution of what he calls several property.
Several property, not just communal ownership, but individual exclusive control.
Exactly. A radical idea back then, a fundamental break. And that leads to the great paradox.
Which is?
Mankind achieved civilization, this huge scale, by developing and learning rules that were not instinctual. Things like respecting private property, honesty in contracts, trade, competition, gain, even privacy.
Rules that often went against instinct.
Right. They often forbade what instincts screamed for, like sharing everything within the known group, or immediate reciprocity. These new rules suppress that natural morality of the small band.
But that suppression was necessary for growth.
It enabled expansion far beyond the limits of the tribe.
Wow, so it's like we're constantly navigating two different worlds.
That's a key point for Hayek. We live simultaneously in the microcosmos family, close friends, where solidarity and altruism do guide us and should.
And then the macrocosmos.
Wider civilization, the extended order. And the danger, Hayek says, is applying the rules of the microcosmos, the small group rules, to the macrocosmos.
Like trying to treat every stranger exactly like your brother, or answering every single call for help everywhere.
Yes. It sounds noble, but he argues it would completely destroy the extended order that sustains us all. It's just not scalable. It undermines the impersonal signals, like prices, that make the large order work.
Which brings us neatly to Adam Smith and the invisible hand.
Indeed. Though Hayek preferred calling it an invisible or unsurveyable pattern, maybe to emphasize its complexity.
Right. Less. Hand-like. More systemic.
Exactly. Economics, from the start, recognized that this cooperation emerges spontaneously. It's guided by signals, like prices, that individuals react to, but they don't grasp the whole picture.
And their actions lead to unintended consequences, often good ones for the whole system.
Often highly beneficial, yes. It's like evolution, a process of variation, winnowing, and sifting that achieves results far beyond what any conscious design could manage.
Okay, so building on that spontaneous idea, how did these things, knowledge institutions, actually evolve? It wasn't just biological evolution, was it?
No, and this is crucial. Hayek stresses the distinction. Cultural evolution language, morals, law, markets, money that's distinct from biological evolution. And he argues it's actually older.
Older? How so?
Well, basic forms of learned behavior and communication predate complex biological changes in humans. And cultural evolution is much, much faster.
Because it's based on learning and imitation, like Lamarckian inheritance of acquired traits, but for ideas.
Exactly like that, yes. Skills, rules, customs, they get passed on through learning, not genes. And this leads to a provocative point.
Which is?
We tend to think human reason designed all this. Hayek flips it. He says culture and evolution created human reason. Reason is the result, not the initial cause of cultural evolution.
So the idea that reason stepped in and started directing culture is mistaken.
He calls it an unscientific, even animistic notion. Reason evolved within this pre-existing framework of learned rules.
Okay, let's get concrete. How did things like liberty, property, justice emerge from this process?
Hayek points to antiquity, especially the Mediterranean trade networks. Long-distance trade required accepting private domains. You had to have clear rules about who owned what and how it could be transferred far away from the eyes of your local chief or king.
We're talking really ancient trade.
Oh yes, Paleolithic obsidian trade 30,000 years ago. Settlements like Catalhuyuk, Jericho 8,000 years ago, trading materials over long distances. These practices are incredibly old.
And this trade, he says, is older than the state. That feels counterintuitive.
It does, doesn't it? We often see strong states as the peak of civilization. But Hayek argues they often marked the end of dynamic evolution because they could stifle trade and innovation.
So governments often got in the way.
Frequently, he suggests Europe's medieval expansion might actually be thanks to its relative political anarchy. No single power could control everything.
Whereas China, with its strong central government,
Despite its early advances, stagnated because the state could and did heavily restrict commerce and new practices when it chose to.
wow. Okay, so back to Aristotle. You mentioned his blindness. Living in Athens, a trade hub, yet he disliked commerce.
Deeply disliked it. He scorned crematistica, basically, making money through trade or lending. He saw it as unnatural, corrupting, totally separate from good household management, or economia.
And he couldn't grasp evolution or large-scale order beyond the polis.
No, his framework was limited to the directly observable, the small group where intent was clear. He just didn't have the concepts for spontaneous, large-scale order.
And these views, they had long-lasting influence.
Hugely influential on the medieval church, contributing to bans on interest, usury, and a general suspicion of profit-seeking.
Even though profit, Hayek argues, is a vital signal in the extended order.
A vital signal, yes. It indicates where resources are being used effectively to meet needs, even if the individuals involved don't understand the full chain of effects. It guides activity towards what's fruitful for the whole, often unseen system.
This leads us right into the core idea of the book's title, the Fatal Conceit.
Exactly. The conceit, the fatal error, is believing that human reason is powerful enough to consciously design and control this incredibly complex extended order.
And this belief comes from what he calls constructivist rationalism. Thinkers like Descartes, Comte.
Yes, the idea that we can use pure reason to build everything anew, a morality, law, language, discarding tradition, because we didn't consciously design it and don't fully understand it.
And Hayek connects this rationalism to the appeal of socialism, particularly for intellectuals.
He does. He makes the rather pointed observation that intelligent, educated people are often more likely to be rationalists than socialists.
Why? What's the connection?
He suggests it's because they tend to overvalue conscious reason, their own intelligence. They assume order must be designed. They demand rational justifications for everything, which makes them suspicious of evolved traditions whose benefits aren't immediately obvious or provable.
They want to see the blueprint, but for a spontaneous order, there isn't one.
Precisely. And this leads to what he calls a litany of errors, demands that constructivist rationalism places on the world, which the extended order simply cannot meet.
Okay, what are those demands?
1. It's unreasonable to follow what you can't scientifically prove. 2. It's unreasonable to follow what you don't fully understand.
Right, that suspicion of tradition again. What else?
3. It's unreasonable unless the purpose is fully specified in advance. And 4. It's unreasonable unless the effects are fully known, observable, and seen to be beneficial, like in utilitarianism.
But Hayek says these are impossible standards for a complex, evolving system.
Completely impossible. They ignore the fundamental limits of human knowledge. You can't know all the effects in advance. You can't fully understand the whole system. Demanding this is demanding omniscience.
Which explains why central planning is doomed to fail, in his view.
Absolutely. The total knowledge needed, who has what, who needs what, all the local circumstances, it's simply not knowable to anybody, any single mind or committee.
But decentralized systems, like markets with private property,
Allow far more information to be generated and used locally, coordinating actions through impersonal signals like prices, even though no one planned the outcome.
the market works through unintended consequences.
Yes, and trying to make this impersonal process just or fair, according to some preconceived notion, is, for Hayek, naive anthropomorphism. You're treating an evolutionary process like a person who should be distributing goodies fairly.
It's like asking the weather to be fair.
Exactly. Now, tied into this is that deep, almost visceral distrust of commerce, of profit, of money.
Where does that come from?
Historically, lots of places. The mystery of making gains without obvious physical toil, it's smacked of sorcery or cheating to some. There's also often an overvaluation of manual labor.
As if only sweating creates real value.
Something like that. And economics introduced concepts like marginal utility, the idea that value isn't inherent in the object but subjective based on the usefulness of the next unit to a specific person in a specific situation.
Like water being more valuable in the desert than by a river.
Precisely. It's subjective. The market works by coordinating millions of these subjective valuations and diverse, often unknown, individual goals.
And Hayek turns the criticism of profit on its head, saying it's selfish to condemn it.
Yes, because condemning the pursuit of profit hinders the process that discovers how to best use resources to satisfy needs, ultimately making everyone poorer than they could have been. It imposes deprivations on others by slowing wealth creation.
Okay, another fascinating angle Hayek explores is language itself. Our poisoned language, he calls it.
Yes, how words shape our thinking, sometimes in misleading ways. He particularly focuses on society and social.
What's wrong with society? Seems harmless enough.
He argues it lumps all human interaction together, falsely implying a single common pursuit of shared purposes, which is only true for small groups, like a family or a team.
But not for the whole extended order.
No. In the extended order, people cooperate, but towards millions of different individual ends. Using society blurs that vital distinction. De Juvenal called it that instinctive nostalgia for the small group, trying to force large-scale orders into that small group mold.
And that leads to problems.
Historically, often tyranny, as leaders try to impose one common purpose on everyone.
And then there's the adjective social. He really dislikes that one.
Calls it a weasel word, the most confusing expression in politics, because it subtly implies deliberate design and invites us to redesign things that were never designed.
And it empties nouns of meaning. How so?
Think of social justice. Hayek calls it a semantic fraud. Justice applies to human conduct, rules of interaction, but the outcome of an impersonal market process cannot be just or unjust in the same way. Applying social tries to make it seem like it should be deliberately controlled for just outcomes.
But doing so undermines the very process itself.
Exactly. He argues demands for social justice are ultimately antisocial because they destroy the rules that allow the extended order, society in the broad sense, to function and support people. Same critique applies to things like social responsibility, when it means overriding market signals for some imposed goal.
So if society and social are problematic, what does he suggest?
He preferred the term catalaxy for the market order and catalactics for its study. It comes from a Greek word katalatin, which means it means not just to exchange, but also to receive into the community and to turn from enemy into friend.
Wow, that's much richer than just economy.
Isn't it? It captures how trade and market interactions build peaceful cooperation among strangers, turning potential enemies into collaborators. It highlights the order-building aspect.
Okay, this deep dive needs to address the big picture consequence. Population. People worry about overpopulation, Malthus and all that.
Right. But Hayek argues Malthus's fear, based on simple models of uniform labor and decreasing returns, doesn't really apply to the complex, differentiated labor of the extended order.
Why not? More people, more strain on resources, surely.
Not necessarily. Increased population density actually creates more opportunities for specialization, the division of labor. And specialization dramatically increases productivity. It leads to increasing returns, not decreasing ones, up to a point.
More minds, more specialization, more innovation.
Exactly. It's not just more mouths, it's more cooperating, specializing brains and hands. Which leads to one of his most provocative statements.
Go.
That capitalism created the proletariat.
Okay, that sounds critical, but he means it differently.
Completely differently. He means the extended market order literally made it possible for millions upon millions of people to survive and multiply, people who simply wouldn't have existed in earlier, less productive economies.
So the proletariat weren't people made poor by capitalism, but people allowed to live by it.
That's his argument. Capital accumulation by the rich wasn't taking from the poor. It was creating the tools, the factories, the systems that provided sustenance and opportunity for a vastly larger population than could have otherwise survived. It made the poor less poor than they would have been otherwise, which was often non-existent.
And he connects market values, profit, directly to this, a calculus of lives.
In a sense, yes. Profits signal where resources are being used in ways that ultimately support more life. Not consciously, perhaps, but that's the systemic outcome. Activities that sustain more people tend to be more profitable and thus attract more resources.
So there's almost a moral imperative to understand this. If we value human life.
That's his implication. If we value the billions alive today, we have a duty to resist ideologies that would destroy the principles like private property that make their existence possible.
He sees this playing out in population growth on the peripheries, like rapidly growing cities and developing nations.
Yes. People are drawn there not by charity, but by opportunity. often driven by ambition, even greed, he says bluntly. But by participating, by learning the rules of the extended order, they gradually improve their lot and contribute to this chain reaction of growth and differentiation.
So the core message is civilization needs large numbers.
It absolutely requires large numbers for the complex division of labor that generates our wealth and knowledge. Knowledge sitting in books is useless if the population shrinks back to a primitive level where no one has the specialized skills to use it. Only the market keeps billions fed.
Okay, one last really surprising piece of the puzzle. How did these traditions, these rules that often feel unnatural and aren't fully understood, actually survive, especially against attacks from instinct and reason?
This is where Hayek brings in religion. Somewhat tentatively, he admits, as informal remarks.
Religion, how does that fit in?
He borrows an idea from James Frazer, suggesting religion provided wrong motives for right action. It gave supernatural or divine justifications for sticking to beneficial customs, like respecting property, maintaining the family structure.
So you didn't need to understand the long-term economic benefits of property. You just needed to believe God commanded it.
Exactly. Religion provided the magic faiths, the strong emotional backing, to preserve these rules long enough for the groups practicing them to demonstrate their advantages and outcompete others. It shielded beneficial traditions from rational critique before their benefits were obvious.
That's quite a perspective. So even an atheist should acknowledge a debt to religion.
Hayek argues precisely that. Even an agnostic ought to concede that we owe our morals, and the tradition that has provided not only our civilization but our very lives, to the acceptance of such scientifically unacceptable factual claims. It's a pragmatic evolutionary view of religion's role.
And he saw a link between religion supporting property and family and its survival, even predicting communism's fall.
Yes, he noted that the surviving major religions generally supported property and family, and predicted that communism, being explicitly anti-property and often anti-family, was inherently unstable for that reason.
So, wrapping up this deep dive into Hayek's Fatal Conceit, we've seen civilization as this spontaneous evolution, not a conscious design.
Driven by traditions and moral rules that often clash with our instincts, but are enabled by institutions like property, trade, money.
And the fatal conceit, the idea that we can just rationally design and control it all, is still a major challenge, isn't it? Especially among intellectuals.
It persists, and it fuels demands for things like social justice, which, however well-intentioned, Hayek warns could actually unravel the complex, spontaneous order that sustains us.
So for you, the listener, the invitation is really to appreciate this immense complexity, the unintended wonders of this extended order.
Understanding these processes, which coordinate more knowledge than any single person can grasp, it's pretty crucial for thinking about our world, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And maybe a final thought to leave you with, building on that idea of population and survival.
Hayek's stark warning.
Yeah. He believed that if we don't resist ideas that destroy these core moral principles, like several property, we are, in effect, condemning millions to starvation.
It frames it as a profound duty, almost a moral obligation, to understand and protect this spontaneous order.
So the closing question for you is, what does that idea, that duty, mean for how you look at society, at progress, even at what you personally consider to be good?